Hey guys, Steven here, Fanatic Perspective. Happy New Year. First video of 2020. We're starting off with a bang. The Dallas Cowboys have decided to part ways, deciding not to re-sign Jason Garrett. Allegedly, we're going to get into breaking down all of the latest coaching drama revolving around the Dallas Cowboys, why I say allegedly, and if these reports are true and ultimately are confirmed by the Jones family via press release or press conference, who are some candidates, who are the people we're looking at, and breaking down one candidate in particular who I think is very, very intriguing for the Dallas Cowboys. But before I get into that, I want to give a shout out to our sponsors, Boss's Ranch, guys. These bottles of ranch have been flying off the shelf at HEB. Cold produce section is where you can get them. They are proprietary to HEB. Those of you here in Central Texas have been doing a wonderful job supporting the brand. Just got a couple texts today. Some more folks purchasing some Boss's Ranch. They have some really, really cool social media activity going on. I'll have those links below. Speaking of social media, guys, we're nearing 1,000 Twitter followers, 1,000 Instagram followers. So social media is starting to pick up. If you rock with us and you want to see different, things we're talking about and different conversations we're having, or just another way to connect with myself or Matthew or John and folks on this channel, please subscribe and follow us on all social media accounts, links below. So I say Jason Garrett out allegedly because I did see the Jane Slater tweet that, from the players and folks she's talked to, and Jason Garrett has not responded yet. And that's as of the time I'm doing this video, with the way the news has been and how slow it's been out of Cowboys camp. Here we are on Friday, Thursday night, according to Ed Werder, the Dallas Cowboys decided that he will no longer be a part of the organization, and they will ultimately be pursuing another head coach. So what does all of this mean? And guys, regarding Jason Garrett, I actually did a deep dive into the past 10 years and where I think he is as a head coach, and where I think the disconnect is, and our need for a coach to elevate us to a championship level. I think and I'm not here to rehash that video. If you want to check that out, please do. I'll have the link below as well. But in terms of Jason Garrett and where we leave off here, I really feel as though, and I said that then, he is a good head coach, and he is somebody that can benefit some situations here in the NFL, just not the fit that we need at this time, and a voice that has grown tired from the fan perspective, tired from a player perspective, and really, you see some of these coaches, sometimes they need to take a step away from the game. Some of the coaches that we may be looking at are recently out of the game for various reasons that, need to recharge that battery, so to speak, and take a look at, finding new ways to be innovative, and just having that juice and getting those players up to play each and every week. So, as regards to Jason Garrett, I think, yeah, he could be great I think he can be great in two different areas. I think as a head coach, he's a guy who can be the adult in the room for a young team like the Browns, a team like the Jaguars. I think Jason Garrett would do well with there. Like the Jaguars in particular, like if they decided to move on from Doug Marrone, that's a guy who could come in, stabilize things, and consistently get them to the playoffs and get them playing at it. Because Jason Garrett's whole thing is about process. His whole thing is about process day to day, and he's great Monday through Friday. And that's something that I think some teams in the NFL need to learn how to master, being a professional each and every week, preparation, strength and conditioning, all those things. Those are things that teams like Jaguars, teams like the Browns, they don't have that culture there to where they're giving that professional level of effort and preparation each and every week because it shows on the field. Not to say that Dallas Cowboys have been perfect at it by any means, but we need the spark that we need is to get us that juice. And again, situations are different. And this is going to lead me to the coaches I think could fit for Dallas, because ultimately what Dallas needs is one of the unique things about the Dallas Cowboys is every team gets up for you, right? It's America's team. It's the spotlight game of the week. It's, primetime games. Whenever the Dallas Cowboys are in town or teams come to AT&T Stadium, they're always going to get up for the Cowboys, right? And one of the things that made us special in the 90s and any time the Cowboys have been great is there's always been a level of intimidation, a level of swagger that comes with that star. And I think that's one of the biggest things that's been missing and lacking from the Jason Garrett regime. We've seen the spark at times, but never consistently. And it's really, really hard to do with teams, especially when you have a team full of so much talent the way the Dallas Cowboys have. And look, people always look at these teams and they say, well, it's easy to coach guys when the whole team's talented and anybody should be able to coach this roster. It's actually really difficult to coach players that are really talented, to bring everybody to the same page, to manage egos, to sometimes humble some guys into accepting certain roles that they may not be comfortable with based upon previous production in their careers. These are all things you have to balance. You look at any great team in any professional sport over the history of time, when it's a heavy collection of talent, it always takes a special coach to mold all that together. I use the Phil Jackson analogy all the time, not just with the Chicago Bulls, but also with the Los Angeles Lakers. Anytime the Yankees have won, whether it's Joe Torre or way back in the day Don Mattingly and all these type of guys, the George Steinbrenners of the world have always had to find that particular person to bring out that swagger and that juice from those organizations. Even going back, in Jimmy Johnson, right? The people were scared to play the Dallas Cowboys at one point in time, believe it or not. There was a certain level of intimidation that was brought to the table that Jimmy Johnson was able to cultivate from the young talent that he had at the time, because he was always able to get those guys to turn up, especially in big games. Big games, they wanted to show out. They wanted to embarrass their opponent. They wanted to talk trash. They wanted to get in people's head. They weren't afraid of the spotlight. It wasn't one of those things where it's like, oh, week 17, winning and get in against the Eagles, and we're shaking our boots. Those teams, situations like that, they embrace those opportunities. And so that's where we've fallen short in this Jason Garrett regime, and why I think many of us as Cowboys fans are excited to see a new day, a new regime where we can have the talent that's been collected, because Jason Garrett does deserve credit in terms of talent evaluation and some of the key decisions he's made with the roster. He has been a part of that. And that's why I say I think he would be good in a spot as a head coach for a young team, and I think he would be good in the front office, in charge of like player personnel, player development, a job like that, where he can take his gifts in regards to evaluations and some of his smarts from Princeton. I think there's a lot of value that he can bring to the table there. And I think that's why some people were even entertaining the possibility of him remaining in the Cowboys front office. But they got to rid themselves of that and clear and go in another direction. I think that's the best case for Jason Garrett. May not be the worst thing in the world for him to sit out for a year or two and gain some perspective. He can come back more, a much better football mind, whether it's coaching or in the front office. But moving on to the names that we've been hearing about, some have thrown out Josh McDaniels of the New England Patriots offensive coordinator. For those that don't remember, he was the one that at the last second accepted the job for the Indianapolis Colts and turned it down, and they went the direction of Frank Reich from Philadelphia Eagles. Then, he's still, been on board with the New England Patriots. Obviously, recently won the Super Bowl last year, working with Tom Brady, failed as his, in his initial stint as head coach of the Denver Broncos. What would he bring to the Dallas Cowboys? And I'm not going to go into every single candidate because he's not the one I want to focus on. But in terms of Josh McDaniels, as intriguing as it sounds, I don't know how his personality would vibe with the Jones family. He is an outsider, and we've talked about it repeatedly on this channel of this organization being a family business. So Josh McDaniels coming in, I would like it from the standpoint of somebody being an outsider, make things uncomfortable, similar to a Jimmy Johnson before and a Bill Parcells in the 2000s. But Josh McDaniels doesn't have that same credibility as a head coach to come in and take charge of things like that. Now, I think he would be good for our quarterback, our offense. He's obviously been one of the best coordinators in the league. They've struggled this year with more so personnel related and the drop off of the quarterback and Tom Brady as he continues to age. But, scheme wise, he's one of the better X and O's guys in the league and somebody who is still a highly regarded, very bright mind. I'm not the highest on Josh McDaniels personally, as some others are. But that's definitely somebody, a name that you're hearing floated for a lot of different jobs. The other candidates. So I think the top three right now, just from what I've gathered across social media, because everybody's source has got different things going on. And again, this is all alleged because as Jane Slater is reporting, she's not ready to concede that everything is official in terms of Jason Garrett even being let go. This is all assumed, alleged, what have you. The top three right now, I would say it would be Urban Meyer, Lincoln Riley, and Mike Zimmer, the Minnesota Vikings. So going into, because the person I want to talk about and I want to kind of do a pro-con breakdown is Urban Meyer, because to me he's the most intriguing candidate. Lincoln Riley has been linked to the Cowboys now for the last couple of years. He's a guy who's been, one of the highly regarded young minds in offensive football, up there with the Sean McVays, the Kyle Shanahans. Yes, he's done it on a collegiate level, but college football and NFL, it's difficult both levels, and there's not really, to me, especially with the way the games have gone and from an innovation standpoint and the rules, anybody's looking for somebody that can coach quarterbacks well and design a good offense. See Cliff Kingsbury. So, and Lincoln Riley is far more qualified than Cliff Kingsbury was. And the other thing is, Cliff Kingsbury, playing in the hardest division in the NFL, didn't completely fall on his face with Kyler Murray last year. So that does give some stock up to Lincoln Riley. Now, many people are going to come on and say, well, Steve, Lincoln's defenses are getting blasted in the playoff games. He hasn't been successful on the biggest stage, but he's had a remarkable record throughout his time in Oklahoma. He's dominated the Big 12. He has obviously developed remarkable quarterback play. Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts last year, who has severe limitations throwing the football, but yet still statistically was up there, one of the leading passers in the country, yards per attempt, second in the Heisman race. And the thing with Lincoln Riley is he's maximized the talent of what he's had. Now, he's had very talented offenses. They've fallen short in the playoffs because they don't have the bodies physically, especially on defense, to compete with the big dogs. And I think a lot of people know that that pay attention to college football. That wouldn't be the case with the Dallas Cowboys. Now, he would need to be married to a veteran, well-known, well-respected defensive coordinator to take care of that side of the ball, a la Sean McVay and a Wade Phillips. I think that's, I think that would be a no-brainer if you brought on Lincoln Riley. I do think he would be good for the culture and good fit for the type of guys we have on the team. But I do worry about Lincoln giving us that edge and that swagger in the big games, and that's kind of my apprehension there. Because honestly, that's what I'm looking for in our next head coach. I need somebody that can get us up for those Eagles games all the time, get us up for when we play the Packers all the time, and give us that juice. Right now, we're not getting that. All right, and I don't know if Lincoln Riley, as good as he is schematically, gives us that juice and gives us that edge. And as while he's done a great job, like I said, squeezing the talent out of folks, we have seen on big stages, they some of the guys tuck their tails between their legs. So just being real. Urban Meyer. I want to go through quick pro-con with Urban Meyer and why I think he's the most intriguing candidate for the Dallas Cowboys. Urban Meyer right now is the closest thing Jerry's going to get to a Jimmy Johnson. And I think deep down inside, knowing how that whole split happened, Jerry Jones is so desperate. At least I hope he's so desperate for a Super Bowl that he would want to kind of right that wrong from the past. And I know he won with Barry Switzer, but they never maximized what they were able to do. And I think it's a relationship that could be mutually beneficial. Now, I say that with a bit of pause because Urban Meyer, being from Ohio, and recently coaching Ohio State, and kind of that being home. Cleveland Browns are also an intriguing spot, and they have been open about being very, very interested in Urban Meyer. But when I talk about the Dallas Cowboys and why it could potentially make sense, of all the coaches out there, nobody gives me that juice for big games like Urban does. Because let's start with the pros. He's a winner. And not only is he a winner, he's a three-time national championship winner. He's a guy that's won at every level of football he's coached, especially as a head coach, Bowling Green, Utah, University of Florida, and then Ohio State. And not just one, but was dominant. Especially Utah, he was only there for 2 years. They went undefeated last year. Alex Smith becomes the number one pick. He goes to Florida. Tim Tebow has one of the all-time great college careers. And you think about he had Tebow. They recruited Cam Newton. He won early on with Chris Leak. So he's also won with different types of quarterbacks. And I think one of the facets that impresses me with Urban Meyer is his attention to detail, all three levels of the game: offense, defense, and special teams. When you hear him talk about the game, he is one of the all-time great football minds in the history of the game. Now, yes, he's only coached college football, and I'm going to get to a point later on in terms of one of the things that could be the motivator for Urban Meyer. But just looking at the pros and his resume, three-time national champion, only lost 9 games his 6 or 7 years at Ohio State. That's crazy. I think he coached 7 seasons at Ohio State and he lost 9 games. I think it was like 83-9, I believe, that I had pulled up. So I mean, just remarkable, a remarkable record. Yeah, 83-9, 54-4 in the Big Ten at Ohio State, and just was absolutely phenomenal. Won a national championship there, obviously, with one of our signature players, Ezekiel Elliott. And so there's a lot of upside to having somebody with that type of pedigree that understands how to get his teams up, get his guys up for big games. Urban Meyer, I think, is somebody that has shown and mastered the ability to coach very talented teams. I talked about earlier about guys understanding the ability to bring the Kobe's and Shaqs, the Scotty and Pippins, those great Jeter teams, all those teams with a lot of talent, bring them together. Urban Meyer has shown that tremendously, and he gets his team to turn up for big games. That's always been the case. Even when they've seemed to be outmatched, to the eye. I think back to Ohio State versus Alabama, where he has a Cardell Jones, and my Texas football coach right now, Tom Herman, was offensive coordinator of that team. They defeated Alabama in the semifinal to go on and win the national championship versus Oregon when Marcus Mariota had won the Heisman. And they were so dominant in that playoff run after it was very controversial for them even making the playoff. He always seems to get the best out of his teams on the biggest stages. That is something that the Dallas Cowboys absolutely need and would be a big selling point for me to the Jones family. Urban Meyer has also shown that he's coached in different situations, different pressures, right? Florida is not the easiest place to coach. Ohio State is definitely not the easiest place to coach. Managing those expectations, signature programs. Yes, working for Jerry Jones, there's going to be some give and pull there. I also think, in going to the cons, and I'll get there later, but Urban would be here for a good time, not a long time. So it would be one of those things where if he's ever going to make the transition to an NFL team, his ability to coach a lot heavily talented teams would work out favored here. Even versus a place like Cleveland, who's also talented, but they don't have, to me, the stuff, the meat in the trenches to compete right off the bat, whereas the Cowboys have more of those tools and something they can utilize in the draft. Speaking of the draft, Urban Meyer recently being a college coach would actually be an advantage for him, having seen he's recruited so many of these kids. The relationships that he currently has in the league, of all the players that have recently come from Ohio State, even some that are still in the league from the University of Florida, and understanding the psyche and the mentality of these players. And then the guys that are going to be coming into the draft the next 2 to 3 years are guys that he was just recently recruiting all his time at Ohio State. And that was something that was a significant advantage going back to the Jimmy Johnson era when he took over as the Dallas Cowboys head coach from University of Miami. Jimmy had the ability when they were getting ready to draft guys, especially in those mid to late rounds, understanding who to take chances on. He had significant personal intel on some of these players that many other coaches that are, especially guys that are only pro coaches, don't have. Now, scouting is far more advanced and far more, in terms of the regions and the analytics and access that we have to certain things, social media included. It's come a long way since the 1990s. But there's nothing like Urban Meyer saying, hey, I know that kid personally. I know, his work ethic, and he's a guy I recruited heavily. He's a guy that I think can come here and really help this organization. You also look at maybe a guy where everybody in the room's banging the table for somebody, and he says, you know what, I don't like that kid once he gets money. That's something that Urban Meyer can come in and say, and I think would be a huge, huge selling point. Look at some of the weaknesses we've had on this football team, special teams being one. He's always taken that seriously. And again, being a 3-tiered football coach is big for me. Getting the team to turn up for big games is big for me, and Urban gives us that. Now, it's a high-risk, high-reward situation. I think people on this channel that listen to my Texas videos have actually heard me say I would not like Urban Meyer to be the head coach at Texas if it ever came to that. And that's because of the moral stuff. I don't think he's the best person in the world, just being frank. I think he's a whatever it takes type of person, and there's some stuff there on his resume that screams sleazebag a little bit, right? I mean, when you go back and look at some of the culture issues they had at the end of the day at Florida, and that kind of goes into some Jimmy Johnson stuff we heard coming out of Miami too. And then you also you think about Aaron Hernandez and what he knew or what he didn't know. You look at Zach Smith at Ohio State and some of the things that started to go afoul there. What he did know, what he didn't know. Because he's an extremely intelligent guy, right? So I would find it hard to believe that he didn't know more than he let on regarding any of those situations. And the messes that seem to follow in 2 consecutive stops is discouraging. It's a red flag. You also look at with Urban Meyer, he's got some quit in him. I do wonder if he were to become the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys and we start off 3-5 or get off to a rough start. The one thing you knew about Jason Garrett was he was going to stick with it. By hook or by crook, it was going to be consistent process. And the team was able to get out of it, at least last year. Urban Meyer is a guy who I could see all of a sudden a health challenge pops up. We've seen that happen before. And I personally think some of those things have been bogus. And I know people are going to come on and maybe be critical of that comment, but that's just what I see from my view as a fan, and it looks, I just see that in him sometimes. And as great as a winner as he's been in these stops, we have seen him give up at Florida, especially when he knew. I feel like he knew what was about to happen at Alabama, and then the Ohio State situation. I feel like he knew it was about to come down there if he didn't step away from a from a NCAA sanctions standpoint, almost. So those are some things to be concerned about. Now, I've always said I didn't want him at Texas, and he'd be here for a good time, not a long time. Dallas Cowboys is completely different. Here's why. I look at the University of Texas. It's a school. It's, you're working for a university. I don't think he should be around kids anymore, and from a moral standpoint. However, the Dallas Cowboys is corporate America. And if you're going to be my CFO or hold any C-level title in corporate America, and you can help generate our company to certain levels and successes that we are currently losing to our competitors in the marketplace, morals aren't as important in corporate America as they are in a university and developing kids and developing young men. So that's why I make that distinction. Also, working for the Joneses, there's no NCAA rules. He's working with adults now. It's not the same thing as hiding, kids failing drug tests in college. Like, the NFL is a completely different culture, completely different environment. And I don't think he's going to be one of those stereotypical college coaches that make the mistake of being too rigid when they get to the NFL. I think he's shrewd enough to understand how to mold that line, even with the way he coached some of the Florida teams and the way he coached some of the Ohio State teams. I think they were very, very different. So he's shown the ability to adjust and move within the personality of his players, if you will. So I think that would be a benefit. And again, a lot of that stuff would fall on Jerry Jones. Now, the biggest thing is, what would his working relationship look like with Jerry Jones? And I think that's where some of the intrigue of the Cleveland Browns comes into play, because he probably would have a lot more control in Cleveland than he would obviously in Dallas, right? But Dallas, and I keep hearing some of these knuckleheads on Twitter like Danny Cannell talk about the Browns are a better job than the Dallas Cowboys. Knock it off. Or Jason McIntyre as well. And it's just clickbait. Those are guys just trying to get, trying to be the hot take guy out there in the media. It's ridiculous. The Cleveland Browns are one of the worst franchises in all of sports. Okay. Say what you want about the Dallas Cowboys. We've ascended to a tier, at least we're a 500 level ball club, win healthy every single year, and we make the playoffs, win the division every other year. It's just a question of getting over that hump and getting to the NFC Championship game and Super Bowl level. So this is a champion. This is going from good to great. All right. The Browns aren't even that good, period. So that whole conversation needs to stop. But that would be your selling point with Urban Meyer. And then the last person, actually, just to conclude with Urban, I would be on board with it. Like I said, corporate America, he's a winner, and he can get my team to turn up in big games. I feel like we would actually play with swagger, whether it's Zeke. I know the staff would be A1. Go look at the list of names of coaches he's developed and folks they've had to take over. Now, I will say, if we bring him in, I said earlier, be here for a good time, not a long time. We would need to be making sure we're developing a coach and waiting to take over. It's not going to be a whole decade thing like you saw with Jason Garrett. It won't be. But again, with the roster it is and some of the ages where they are and contract-wise, we have to win now, especially with Jerry's age too. But moving over to Mike Zimmer, who I think would be number 3 Minnesota Vikings right now, because I think overall these people in the name I have not mentioned is Sean Payton, but I don't see realistically how they could pull off a trade or anything for Sean. But with Mike Zimmer, and this is just to conclude because he'd be the third one, Mike Zimmer is somebody who obviously was former defensive coordinator for us, and part of the family of Dallas Cowboys. And for those who saw when they beat us, Jerry Jones he couldn't stop raving about how good of a coach Mike Zimmer was. When they beat us earlier this year. He's obviously coaching the playoffs against Sean Payton and the New Orleans Saints. We'll see how that plays out. I just saw a statement earlier today from the Minnesota Vikings. I think it was the owner saying that they want to have Mike Zimmer there for a long time, him and Rick Spielman, who's the GM and a very good GM. So we'll see how that plays out. That's another person who would be more on the defensive side of the ball. Maybe gives us opportunity to keep a Kellen Moore and a John Kitna and let them do their thing offensively. We'll see. But I think those are the 3 guys where, I've kind of circled, but there's a whole bunch of names. Marcus Spears threw out Tony Dungy today. My boy texted me and was like, what's up with Marvin Lewis? Eric Bieniemy out there. There's a lot of names. Even a guy that coached under Urban Meyer, like a Dan Mullen at Florida, who was Dak Prescott's coach at Mississippi State. So who knows where this thing's going to go? The only other name I don't think I mentioned was Mike McCarthy. And again, with same thing with McDaniels there. How will he vibe personality-wise with the Jones family? And so ultimately, it's going to be Jerry, who's the decider and how the mentality of how he's going to work with this person and what that person's role going to be. Are they going to be a supervisor like Jason Garrett was, or are you actually going to allow that person to be a head coach? I think that's the ultimate question. But if they want to win big and take that risk, I think Urban Meyer might be your guy. Let me know in the comments what you think. Remember to subscribe. Let me know how you feel. I know this is a longer video, but so much to talk about beginning of the year. Can't wait to hear from you guys. Peace.